Yeah, so my name's my name's David Bennett, and I'm representing the Transition Network Sweden today. I found Transition, I suppose, about 4 or 5 years ago, and since then I started a local group where I live in Stockholm. But don't tell anybody else here that I live in Stockholm. So we've got the local group, and it's sometimes difficult to attract new members and to get things going. But now we're really moving on. It feels like where I'm living, and it's great to have insight into what's going on in the rest of the country. And transition for me is it's really very much an empowerment of the civil society, making sure that people realise that the way things are don't have to be the way things are. That you have the power within yourself and within your community to change the way we live our lives. There are so many people suffering today from mental health issues and economic issues. We seem locked in to where we are, and there may be sort of a belief that politicians hold the key, that someone else has to do it for us. What I really love about transition is that we can do it ourselves, and to some extent we have to do it ourselves. Transition and climate change. Transition has to focus very much on local societies and local communities, and the local communities obviously don't have the transport issues of globalization. So if we look at sort of some of the causes of climate change, we've got carbon in the atmosphere caused by a globalized society. And so one approach is to minimize emissions, obviously, but there's also a way of getting carbon back into the soil. So when we talk about strong local communities, then when local communities are able to solve their own problems, supply their own needs, grow their own food, generate their own biogas through community projects, then obviously the requirement for inputs from outside of the region are drastically reduced, which means in the case of any shocks, then that community is much better suited to manage the situation, to be resilient. So the Paris Agreement said, and governments agreed to, strengthen society's ability to deal with the impacts of climate change. Obviously, transition, or maybe not obviously, but transition comes from peak oil. And that's very much an issue, at least in the Swedish countryside, where the high transport costs and the need to move people and things over larger distances than in urban environments. The availability of liquid fuels to power cars and tractors is a larger issue. And also a part of the Paris Agreement was to invite cities and regions to scale up their efforts and support actions to reduce emissions. And that's one of the beautiful things about transition, is that it does scale up so easily. You get one group and they start doing good things, and it represents a higher quality of life. And we'll see some lovely examples from Agnes later on about how that really improves quality of life, and it grows of itself. And again, the Paris Agreement, it sort of plays right into the hands of the transition movement. In building resilience, that's one of the core terms of the transition movement. To be resilient, so to be able to withstand external shocks into the system. So transition in Sweden then, Anna covered a fair amount of this, so we'll just go through it quite quickly. But All Sweden Shall Live, this the abbreviation there, HSSL, that's the Swedish name for All Sweden Shall Live. It started there, and there was a half-time employee as a project leader, as an ambassador really, going around inspiring local groups into resilience work. Transition Network Sweden, because Transition Sweden in the beginning was a project out of All Sweden Shall Live, a limited time project. There was a number of people that felt that it should be more, that there should be more control from the people, from a more grassroots level. So the Transition Network Sweden was started, or we agreed to start in 2013 when the paperwork was sent in 2014. And we're approximately 120 groups, approximately, I don't have the exact figures, 15 qualified trainers to hold training courses. And there's going to be about 5 training courses spread throughout the country this year. So it's all about enabling local communities to meet local needs. So this is it's a cloudy day in Värmland when they opened the solar power park there, and that's coming very much from the southern Norrland, northern Sweden transition centre, where they've created a meeting place and a cafe. But perhaps one of the more important things there is the production kitchen. If you're looking to increase the value of products produced in the local area, then in terms of food products, then obviously you need a kitchen, something that's approved for making larger amounts of food, because obviously you can't just do it at home in your kitchen and then sell it on the market. You need to have an approved kitchen. Örebro, there's so much happened there under such a long time that it's now part of municipal policy, that everything, the local government there has got a transition written into what they're wanting to achieve, and obviously permaculture coming out of transition coming out of permaculture is very much about food production and resilient food production, so that we see holistic management and regenerative agriculture, that is using animal and perennial based systems to get carbon out of the atmosphere and back into the soil, which doesn't just give greater harvests, but obviously gets the carbon out of the air. Aquaponics, another innovative method. This is in Härnösand, a little further north, still on the coast, on the east coast, and that they've got one greenhouse at the moment. They're going to be actually moving shortly to a larger facility, and that's going to be in the form of community-supported agriculture. So the local community responding to local needs, for in this case tomatoes, chilies, and things you can grow in a greenhouse. In my opinion, one of the foremost examples of regenerative agriculture in Europe is this farm, Ridgedale Permaculture in Värmland, kind of equidistant between Oslo, Stockholm and Copenhagen. Yes?
Can you just explain regenerative? Just a little
regenerative agriculture. It's going a step further than sustainability, really. If you look at the state of the soils, and a lot of the carbon in the atmosphere comes from degraded farmland, and regenerative is making soils better, so making the land better. How? Through, in the case of Ridgedale in particular, through perennial tree-based and animal systems. So they've planted an awful lot of nut trees there, which don't grow that well in Sweden, but you know they're experimenting with a lot of new varieties, and then using the principles of holistic management, which is to intensively graze a small amount of land, and then move the animals on, sort of mimicking the effect of carnivores on, say, a large herd of zebras or wildebeest or something. Where, you know, they're all there in a group, and then they get chased to new. They eat the grass and they move to a new area, move to a new area, move to a new area, and then you come back to the first area when it's recovered. Alan Savory has done a fantastic TED talk about that. So regenerative, very much. I mean, if you look at the degradation that's in the environment at the moment, the amount of carbon in the atmosphere and environmental damage, then sustainability is not really enough. So beyond sustainability is regeneration to make things better. We talk very much about carbon footprint and ecological footprint. And yes, we have to reduce that, but we can't reduce ourselves to nothing, because then there's nothing left of us. We are a global force, humanity, and we need to think more in terms of a green handprint, which is a positive effect, and regenerative agriculture, for example, carbon farming, getting carbon back into the soil. It will make your vegetables grow better, and it will. Some other examples of what's going on. Southern Sweden is kind of overrepresented in excellent things that are being done in terms of a number of places. Gothenburg, clothes swap, repair cafe, for example. Urban gardening. Arlingsås is a sort of semi-urban setting, really. 1,000-metre carpet set, which I think they're in their 4th or 5th year now. Växjö having a repair centre and urban gardening, things like that. And in fact, one of the new and I find quite exciting concepts is the fibre optic intentional communities idea, which is coming up in the north of Sweden, which has a slightly national romantic name, but yet Landsbygd, the Astrid Lindgren reference, where they'll be looking to build, to start, I think, new communities, new villages with pre-prepared housing modules. And there seems to be municipal money available for that.